We're going now, aren't we? We're into the third week of this Monday mood. It is Monday, the 25th of May, Memorial Day to those people who are in the US. If anyone's at home listening, it's Bank Holiday Monday. So I'm sure there's a few sore heads out there after last night or the weekend in general. Weather in the US is minging at the moment, or especially in Jersey, has been disgusting. So ever notice this one where, especially people from the UK and Ireland, and it rains over here and someone goes to you, they go, "Oh, I bet it reminds you of home, this, doesn't it?" And you're like, well, yeah, it does, but I've been here for 23 years. It just reminds me of America when it rains. Does me head in a little bit, that. I know it's a little bit random, but I figured I'd kick the week off with that little observation for you. But yeah, I hope everybody's okay. Welcome back to the Monday Mood.
Across Pond Podcasting.
Last week's conversation, I got a lot of good feedback, actually. Nice feedback. So again, you know what? You've got to be careful what you wish for. If people say things are good, then you've got to carry on going, haven't you? So here I am again. And last week's conversation with Matt Maul brought up some good points. Now, I didn't know Matt out with a couple of little conversations we've had over the phone. And he's a very analytical guy, and I like that. And a lot of his processes, I know we joked at the beginning about needing to have the boards and the whiteboard and forgetting things all the time. But he said one thing that really, really stuck with me. And I'm probably paraphrasing it a little bit as well. When he looks back at all the times that he felt like he'd achieved the most and he pivoted his life into a different direction for good and for a positive thing, it's always come from a place where he had nothing and he had to rebuild and really dig deep and build something. And it really stuck out to me, that, because I think about my own journey as well from a selfish standpoint. I got a lot of messages from people about that. So if it hit home for you, I'm glad. And I hope you got something from last week's episode, but we'll dive in a little bit. The big thing for me is something that doesn't get talked about when people go through a major transition, whether it's work, moving countries, changing relationships, ending in relationships or starting something else. Whatever it is, I know they talk about these hypothetical ponds. Whatever these ponds that you might have crossed is, you get this clean slate. And although it might be rough and it might be raw and it might not feel like it's a new thing and it's a positive, you have to take it. And a clean slate can actually be a gift, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. If I use myself as an example that maybe springs ideas in other people, I remember getting here in 2003 and the overwhelming feeling for me, and I think this is part of the reason why I like it over here so much and I enjoy it so much, is that it wasn't the fact that it was exciting. It was exciting, but it was the exposure to something new. And like everything that was holding me back, or that I perceived to be holding me back where I was back home, wasn't there anymore. And it was just, there was no history, there was no reputation, no perception to deal with. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what I was good at. And nobody knew where I'd failed before. No one knew where I'd tried and failed. And the freedom in that just made me think to myself, you know what, I've got a chance here. And at first, it can feel terrifying because you've come out of a situation where you have your own perceptions of things. You come out of a situation because you lean on certain pillars within a relationship or a job or whatever it is. You lean on the fact of being a known entity. And I feel like you go through life and you have to justify this backstory all the time, which I don't think, the older I get and the more I see it. But when something shifts and you realize no one cares, no one knows what I failed at before, nobody's got a fixed idea of what I'm capable of, you start fresh. No baggage, no expectation, no pressures from this old version of yourself that used to exist that doesn't anymore. It's genuinely one of the most underrated feelings in the world. This clean slate, blank canvas, fresh start. Think about whatever you want. And then you think to yourself, when you've got a black canvas, what's the first brushstroke going to be? The biggest thing about blank canvases is that a lot of people, and myself included, I've done this before, is you'll stand in front of it for a long time looking at it, because everything you do, you want this blank canvas to be perfect, but it's never going to be perfect. Nothing's messy on it. It looks spot on, doesn't it? And the first stroke is almost never perfect. And it's not always the best thing on the canvas. And you can always go over it and start again. It's just the start. It could be a line. It could be a squiggly line. It could be something that you build on. It's like when I started this podcast, and I've said it a lot of times, and I don't want to dwell on myself because this is more about everybody else who's listening, and anyone who's been in a situation where you're starting something off for the first time, it wasn't polished. Jesus, listen to the first episode of this if you've got the time. Listen to the first episode with me and Bob. It's nothing like what it is now. And I'm not saying what now is the finished article, but you go back and you listen, the content is there, certain things are there, but it wasn't polished. It didn't sound great. The format wasn't great. I wasn't great talking about things, but it was the first start, and that I put something on the canvas. And then ever since then, every guest, every conversation, every one of these conversations on a Monday has built on top of it and just made it a little bit better as you go. And that's significant of everything. The first coaching session in this country, the first relationship in this country, the first conversation, it wasn't great. And I'll admit, I'll have made a million mistakes, and I am nowhere near perfect. Shocking, bad mistakes, ones that I still live with now. But the older I get, the more eager you are, the more open you are, that willingness to learn without an ego, because you genuinely don't know what you're doing. Like literally no ego associated with this podcast. I try now and be as humble as possible in anything I do and I think it's important that we all are, because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going yet. And even people who can be perceived at being high up in the game, if you go through life with a humility that you still got something to learn every day from your job, then you're going to get where you want to get. Because not only it doesn't get boring, and you're humble enough to take on information from new people. For anyone who's gone through this, right, has crossed over something or had a transition in life that they've changed, whether it's a relationship or a job or a career change or a location change. And if you're feeling the exposure of it or the weight of a change, it's not a warning. It shouldn't be taken as a warning. This whole experience, right, this expat experience, wherever you're from, it's about setting a tone and a masterclass in starting over. So every single person who's has made a move has been brave enough to do that and make that move. So everything you do when you make the move, you should just keep building on it and keep building on it. And if it doesn't work, you start again. And then you keep building again until eventually you get to a point where you've built this life or career, or this how you interact with people, the relationships that you have, because you built yourself from scratch. And it can be tough, but it also makes you sharper and more in tune about what's going on, and also more in tune to other people as well. So you can maybe help them along the way, and again, it comes back to that empathy thing. I'm all about that. It makes you more intentional about who you are and why you're showing up and how you show up, because you can't coast on a reputation of what you used to be like. Because again, remember last week we talked about, or 2 weeks ago in the last Monday Mood, you talk about that snapshot. Is that, even when you put it on your own toes, is that the snapshot that you want everyone to remember you by? Because it mightn't be a good snapshot for a lot of people. So it's important to keep yourself moving. Time and again on this podcast, right, I've seen people who lean into that, embrace that clean slate. And that's what this is about. And it's about trying to empower everybody else who listens to get there and do it themselves. Leave what they left behind. You can dwell on it for a little bit, but don't dwell on it for too long, because you're moving in the right direction, and you just keep going and create something that you're genuinely proud of, whether that's just the way that you feel, whether it's a job, whether it's a relationship. And not because it's perfect, but because everything that you've done is yours and you've made it happen. And that's something to be and this is where I'm trying to bring this all together. Right? This is not going to be the last Monday Mood, I can tell you, but I'm thinking again, like, talk about relationships. And I think about times when I've been on lower than a snake's belly, right? And how the most unexpected person can show up when you need it. And I think about the time, and I've spoke about this on podcasts before, when I was chasing a dream of being a college coach. And I was in a situation where I was pissing in the wind because the money wasn't good, and I was having to do 15 things at once, and I couldn't fully concentrate on the one thing that I wanted to do. And it ended up meaning I wasn't as good as it. I wasn't as effective at it. And it got me to a point where I just burnt myself out. And you know what? I was in a bad spot, and mentally I wasn't in a good place, and I felt like I had nobody around me. and a relationship had come to an end, and I was living in my car, literally. It was funny, I had a Golf at the time, a Volkswagen Golf, which you can imagine how small. It only had 2 doors and a boot or a trunk, and everything I owned was in that car. And then at that point, I was a blank canvas for me, right? And I was at a low point for me, right? And I know people have been in worse spots, but for me, that's what it was. And making those first strokes and allowing myself to make those first strokes, but also the relationships that hold. This is going to sound incredibly linked in, as Dave Simpson would say, our friend Dave Simpson. It's incredibly linked in, but like there's people there that are holding the canvas steady so you can make that first stroke, because you can't do it on your own. You can't. Some of the best clean slates I've ever had always had someone in the background, whether it's Kelly, me missus now, whether it's friends of mine who've always looked out for me when I've needed them and recognized that I needed help. And people who believed in the version of what I've made now, believed in that when it wasn't anything, when it was a blank sheet of paper, right? But again, I think that comes from like relationships that you build over time. That's why it's important to talk to people in the right way and hold yourself in the right way, because you never know when someone's going to pick the phone up. When I think about the names of the people that made those phone calls and picked up the phone for me, like, you know, they didn't have to do that, but it could be someone who you just give the time of day to 6 months, 6 years ago, and they saw something in you, a mindset or a work rate or something, and they said they're part of what makes this next chapter possible, and that's great. And I've been grateful for that as well. So don't want to bore you for too much longer. I hope everyone's still listening. I really hope people get on this, because it's an interesting, it's something that's really relevant. And this whole thing about this black canvas, if you're in a moment of transition, the canvas in front of you, the blank sheet of paper, the fresh start feels more daunting than it is exciting. You just need to reframe it, right? It's not a blank space of emptiness and nothing to do. It's a possibility. It's a chance. It's a version of the story that hasn't been written yet. You don't need the full picture before you start. You just need to take that first stroke. And one stroke leads to another stroke, leads to another. And then you make a decision. Then you have a conversation. Then you have a little bit more confidence. And now all of a sudden the picture change takes shape. And that's how everything that's worth having gets built. It's not one like flash of lightning and everything's there. It's accumulation of small, ballsy, brave little starts. So if anyone's listening, do yourself a favor. And if you're in these moments, whatever it is and wherever you are, just make it happen. That's me. That's me Monday mood this week. A little bit reflective, wasn't it? Maybe I'll be a little bit more upbeat next week. I hope everyone has a top week and the weather's getting a little better. And just remember, the weather's shite in Jersey as well sometimes. And England and Ireland, I will stand on this. England and Ireland are the best places in the world when the sun is shining, because it's gorgeous. Green, lovely. Have a good week. See you later. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you or someone you know has a story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us via our socials or visit www.crossingthepondpodcast.com to get in touch. Please be sure to subscribe, like, or leave a comment if you can. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Across Pond Podcasting.